I've been getting a lot of questions about the weather and its effect on birds. And I was thinking the last time that I got asked about this quite a bit and had to do interviews was back in 1992 when I came here, my first summer here with the Missouri Department of Conservation. We had moved here from North Carolina, and it was a very cool, wet summer, early spring and summer. We didn't turn our air conditioning on until like July that year, and we thought we died and gone to heaven, having grown up in the heat of North Carolina and came here. And of course, we've learned in the 27 years since then that there is no such thing as typical weather, and we haven't seen that kind of weather, I don't think, until this year, where it's this cool and this wet in the springtime. But I remember back then I was getting calls from the Kansas City Star and places asking me what my thoughts were on what effect the cool wet weather was having on wildlife. And so we're getting similar questions as that now. And to find the answer to that, or to examine the topic, you have to go to the base of the food chain, and that are plants and insects. I'm standing in front of the insect section here. Because it all starts there, and birds depend on all of that for their success. When you start with wet, wet is great for plants. We had a very wet winter. We've had a very wet spring. Dandelions were at an all-time bumper crop this year. A lot of plant growth is immense. So nectaring birds such as cedar waxwings and a lot of hummingbirds and the orioles and the grosbeaks, who really have made a living off these petals, have done very, very well. Now, cool and wet. Cool is not so great for seed development. So sometimes these plants that are growing like crazy and producing tons of seed, unless they get a nice dry warm snap, those seeds don't ripen, and it can be not as good for the birds that depend on those. So that's a mixed bag there. We'll have to wait and see how that affects them. But primarily when we think of cool wet, and the concern comes in when we're talking about nesting. These birds with rain, it's a tough job keeping your babies and your eggs warm and dry. Ground nesting birds like wild turkeys and pheasants and bobwhite quail and eastern meadowlarks, birds like that have their eggs right on the ground, can have a very tough time, and they can lose their nest in wet weather like this. Birds that nest along streams or creeks or near on the edges of ponds and lakes, like the Canada geese and mallards and things, quite often their nests get flooded from the rising waters, and now in some of those cases it's not a problem. Birds lay eggs on command, and they can go just build another nest, lay another set of eggs, and keep right on, and that's great. But some birds don't have that luxury, especially migrating birds that come here and only here for a limited time in the summer and have to migrate south. They have a narrower window for their nesting, and so you lose one nest, and sometimes you've got no success to that whole summer. Whereas our resident birds like chickadees and titmice and cardinals, they nest multiple times per season. So how do they deal with it? Well, when the cool weather has an effect on insect populations, insects are not able to propagate the way they want to and expand and have not a lot of bugs out there. The nesting moms and dads know that they have limited resources to feed their babies. So what they do is they want to do one of two things. They can delay their nesting. We've seen purple martins delayed laying their eggs quite a bit because they depend on flying insects. A lot of birds, like bluebirds and cardinals and chickadees, they may just lay less eggs their first nesting attempt because they know they're going to nest 2 and 3 more times. Right? And so the first nest, which typically may have 5 babies in it, they may only lay 3 eggs the first nesting because they know there's not enough insects to feed those babies, all those insects that they need to. So they'll lay less of them. Sometimes they do and go ahead and lay all 5, and a couple of the babies don't make it because there's just not enough insects to feed them all. So it can be tough on birds. Cool, wet weather is a challenge, but it's a challenge that they adapt to, and they will survive, and they will have, you may only lay 2 eggs or 3 eggs here in the spring, but you got another nesting in June. You may lay 5 eggs that time. So hopefully you'll make up that nesting shortfall in the spring when the cool wet weather was more affecting you. So it's a great topic. It's a challenging one, but birds, they're well adapted to their environment. Now this is an unusual spring and summer. They will make it. We won't know the effects full on numbers for many years, and we can see population trends. And if we saw a dip from the results of this summer, we know it affected them more harshly than we first thought. But my guess is it won't be too bad. So thanks for the idea for the question. If you like the videos, please give them a like, give them a share. Give us a decent review on Facebook or on Google.
There's
that
a
helps.
Question.
Bruce says, I have a question.
Amanda Henderson says, I was wondering why they are not eating the safflower seeds I put out. That seed usually goes fast.
Somebody's asked about they're not eating safflower seed. Well, one of the true enemies of seed is moisture. I don't know how often you've changed it out, but if birds are not eating a certain seed at a certain time of year, it's usually because they are finding a substitute in nature. It may be that they're eating red maple seeds, the helicopter seeds that are falling more right now, and whenever those run out, they'll come back to the safflower. So a tough one to answer just because there's so many variables that can play into it. Make sure it's dry and fresh, throw away any wet seed, and replace it with fresh and see if that does it. If not, you'll be a little patient. They'll be back. They're probably finding something else out there in nature that is fulfilling that need in their diet. So again, thanks a lot. Come by and let's talk birds.